I have 3 daughters. One of them is 6 and then 24 and 25. And it's very interesting raising the little one in this world today where everything is fed to her digitally, and it's just surrounded by ease and comfort and all these things. And I just want to get your take throughout this next conversation, really, of like growing up as a woman with a mindset that I think is unstoppable from what I've seen. What you've gone through. We were just talking about, men, boys and girls being raised, without parents or not knowing how to be a man as they grow up and stuff. And you have such a good take on it. It's kind of pretty amazing to hear.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. I think growing up, I feel so privileged and blessed the way that I was able to grow up. I grew up with 2 parents that loved each other. I grew up in Southern California where it was gorgeous and sunny and not as hot in Arizona as it is here.
Where in California?
Huntington Beach.
Nice.
And, I think there's so much foundation laid as a young child going into adulthood. And I was really lucky that I grew up viewing 2 loving parents, and I grew up with a tenacity to achieve. And that was started in sports. And I started playing softball, volleyball. I did gymnastics. It was quite the daredevil. My parents actually took me out to Sonoma. I think it was Red Rock Sliding Park.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, Slide Rock. There we go. And my dad and I climbed all the way up to like the tops of the cliffs and just jumped off. My mom and my sister were like, "Oh my gosh, they're crazy."
How old were you?
I had to have been about 12. Because
Okay.
we'll get into my injury, but I just had such a zest for life in so many ways. And I think it was started by modeling. And you talk about having young daughters, and, I would love to be a parent one day if, the good Lord lets me. And it's like, that was through modeling. It wasn't my parents being like, you should be an athlete and you should do this and you should do that. It's like, no, it was completely modeled by the way that they lived their life and loved me. With that being said, going into sports though, that's where the competitiveness and the tenacity and the motivation really started at quite the young age.
Yeah. What was the first sport you started playing?
Gosh, I did everything. I did like ASO, soccer, softball. But softball was the first sport where I was really hungry to win and get better. And I started playing, I think I did shortstop to start with. I pitched. And then when I got into my club days, I actually caught, which is hilarious because I'm like 120 pounds and I was smaller then. And it was so funny because like the catchers are big.
Yeah.
They're quite built and big, and I was a peanut. And that's where my love and my competitiveness like really shined in the best way.
Specifically from catching or just softball in general?
Just a team environment.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really incredible in a young person's life, whether you're a part of an athletic team, whether you have a great group of friends, you're a part of a club, whatever it looks like. But like being a part of a team and being a captain on a team taught me foundational skills for life, how to work with other people, how to go, the extra mile. I think this is something that always sticks with me, but like accountability. I think there's so many people currently, like whether it's in the workforce, whether it's in your relationship or whatever, that shy away from holding accountability in their life. And it's not to say an F word so early in the podcast, but it's fucking hard to look in the mirror and get real with yourself and say, you know what? That wasn't my best performance out there on the field. And I'm taking accountability and responsibility for it. So when I show up on the field next time, I'm going to bring it. But that doesn't happen without self-realization and reflection.
Totally.
Yeah. I love that it's called reflection too. It's something that we have our, people that we work with, the men that we work with specifically do is have a conversation with themselves in the mirror, literally in the mirror, reflecting in the mirror, because that is the most difficult conversation you'll ever have. It's also the most important conversation you'll ever have. And it's also one that you probably haven't had in a long time, and fortunately that's the way that you grew up, which is amazing. And think about not doing that for 20, 30 years and then having to look this person directly in the eyes, because this person knows when you're lying. This person knows when that performance wasn't as good as it should have been. This person knows your deepest, darkest secrets about why something happened or why something didn't happen or, whatever. And something you said right at the beginning, you said my drive to win, not to compete. You said win first, which I think is a really important distinction, because it's not just to compete. No, I want to win. And that tells me everything that I need to know about your mindset personally And probably why you do the things you do now is, I'm going to win.
You know what I think as well, though? I think early on in a little bit more of my emotional immaturity times, and not to say that I was an immature kid, just meaning like I hadn't grown up yet and done my time. I do think that there is a big distinction of wanting to be the best and wanting to be your best, because striving to be your best is a success. It's a recipe for success, because no matter what, you know that you gave it all that you could, and that was good enough for you. But I think the problem specifically in elite sports, and even just the way that kids are growing up nowadays with trying to get into D1 schools, because that was my goal very on. Like, I wanted to play softball at a D1 school, and I started when I was 10. With the mindset of like, I want to get a scholarship and I want to play D1 sports. And that's what I wanted. But I do think it's really hard to go in that mindset of being 10 years old. It almost leads to perfectionism of like, I have to be the best, which means you have to outperform other people, which means that if you don't do that, then you don't feel good enough inside, which doesn't make for happy players. And I wish, looking back, we'll get into my injury in a second, but it's like looking back, I wish in those moments of like building myself as an athlete, I could have been a little bit more present. Sure. I could have been a little bit like, these are the good times. Like, I love this sport. I'm having fun and sitting in my privilege, which was being able-bodied. Yeah. And I know that's not something that, people think when they're 10 years old, 13, 14, whatever, like, oh, this is all going to go away at 15. But we'll talk about that. That was my reality.
Yeah, it's a very good perspective. I played sports growing up as a kid, but I was actually really, now that I think about it and hear what you guys are saying, my parents let me play baseball up until I played a little bit in high school, and then it kind of ended there. But even when I was playing up, Little League and farm and all that, like I didn't do as much as like my neighbors, Eric and Joe did. They were in all these different leagues and travel teams and all this kind of stuff. And I only played locally. It was great for me to develop confidence, because growing up, like to me, I was like the skinny band nerd. I played music my whole life. But like even playing and getting decent at baseball, every clang, every catch, every good throw, every high five from the team, the little trophy at, Peter Piper Pizza and all that stuff, like that really made a big difference on me. Totally. For sure. But I mentioned my neighbors too, Joe and Eric growing up, they played so much that I think it was actually towards their detriment, because now there's just so much pressure to constantly be playing, constantly be winning. And they didn't grow up to be professional athletes, and they spent so much time under pressure from their parents that now that I look at it, I'm like, man, I want my girl to play sports. I'm getting her into jiu-jitsu very soon. She's 6. Amazing. I want her to get going on that, but I'm not going to push her forever, and just have her go and go and go and go until it's too much. I want to kind of let her like self drive and direct where she wants to go with it.
Which I think is so amazing, because think about it in this way. What builds, I'll just ask the blanket question. Like, what do you think as a father, and what do you think builds confidence? You go first.
What do I think builds confidence in a kid? Yeah. Knowing that they can do something on their own, even whatever it is, like building something, or just getting themselves ready for school. Yeah. These little things that they see others doing for them. Once they can start to do that on their own, I think I see the confidence kind of set in.
I think something that builds a direct correlation with confidence is when they see you act out the things that you tell them to do. So they actually get the reinforcement of seeing you do it, and they were told to do it or how to do it, and then they see you doing it. So it's a neural pathway that says, okay, feels good, looks good, is good kind of thing. Yeah. I think that's one way for sure. And then obviously letting them experience things on their own.
Yeah. And like the definition of self-confidence is essentially learning competence. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And competence is built by doing something over and over and over and over again until you get good at it, and knowing that you can do it yourself. Right. And I think that's the hardest thing in putting kids in sports, and maybe they have a little bit of athletic drive or ability, but maybe they don't stick with it because it's like they don't own it. Mm-hmm. Right? They don't have the accountability and responsibility of the performance. And it's not to say the overwhelming pressure of performing and being the best. It's just holding space to have that accountability, to be able to build that competence, to build the confidence to get out there, because they know that whatever they do, like they're putting their best foot forward. Mm-hmm. I feel like when I heard that, I didn't hear that till way later in life. And I remember hearing that and thinking like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes so much sense. Sure. And and I feel like it means more because I did it. not that my parents forced me to do it, is because I said, no, I'm going to practice this much. I'm going to do this. I own all the responsibility, and then I can control the outcome because
100%.
I put into it. Yeah.
That's at the root of our brand in this podcast. Earn it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you're not excited if your mom ties your shoes for you forever. Eventually you don't care, but when you finally get it and you see that it works and you know how to fix it when it comes untied, you become competent at keeping your shoes tied. That's cool for a little kid when they finally get to do that.
It's cool for a quadriplegic too.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you a really cool example that we saw just this weekend, actually. And it was with a bunch of grown men. We were doing a survival course over the weekend in our retreat, and the guy Jan, he's insane survivalist, the most unassuming guy ever. But like, he's the one that's going to survive the apocalypse for sure.
Oh yeah, he'll be fine
Not
with
a knife.
Me.
And
just kill me now.
Like, yeah. We're standing there, and he's saying stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, you're going to need this for sure." And this, and I was like, "Well, I'm dead on day 2."
Yeah,
No.
But he had us making rope out of yucca, and building fire out of nothing, and all these things. And we're all sitting there making rope, and it's like, it's a very simple process, but you could see a bunch of grown ass dudes light up when they have the little piece of rope that they made, and they're like, I did it, and it's like, it's such a simple thing, but it's like, when you did it, even if it's a simple thing, as simple as hitting a fastball for the first time, or catching the fly ball, or getting the person, whatever, right? To continue with the baseball and the softball analogy, that means so much, especially at a young age, and you get to build upon that super early, and it's really hard to break those habits later in life. For sure.
Take it with you. I think that's the most important thing. And if you have interest in raising your kids in sports, it's like, yes, you have the responsibility and it helps build confidence, but it also like lays a foundation. Like even in my career and what I do, in leading a team, there's been so many elements that I've taken in my business and later in life to what I learned as being a captain when I was 10 years old.
Oh, for sure.
And, and how to work with difficult people and how to push through hard things, and, and just also how to like build camaraderie. There's going to be a lot of teammates, especially like the men that you're referencing in your guys' retreat. I imagine many of them there didn't start the same way that they did on day 1 as they did when they left.
Oh, completely different. You can literally see it in their faces, their posture, everything. It's amazing. And frankly, we just got back last night from it, and getting messages from guys, memos, text messages, stuff like that, like telling us how they are today about it. And I'm kind of out of words for it. We literally have had guys say, "You changed my life. You saved my life." And it's like,
it's amazing.
It really is amazing. And I'm not even really sure how to process it yet, because that is the goal. That's what we want. So we're doing this for men so they can get better, or level up, even if they're not necessarily struggling with things. But when you see it work, it's humbling. It would just be one word. It's really interesting to see it happen. And we already have another one in July, and it's like, man, we're going to go through this every 3 months now, because we do them every quarter or so.
And we should be adding women, and we should be adding women. That's what we talked about before we started.
We definitely talked
what about
that.
The women? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an honor to be doing that kind of work. So I love to get into more of your story here. So you grew up as a very active kid, playing sports, jumping off of cliffs, doing all the things. And then something happened at 15 years old that changed your life. And I'd love to hear what happened.
Yeah. So like I said, grew up really active, doing everything. And I went up to Big Bear, California, which is probably like an hour from our house. And it's quite an icy mountain, and was going to go ski that day. And I was with a ex-boyfriend at the time. I was a sophomore in high school. And a very normal morning, get my skis on. We get all the way up to the top of the mountain, and it was really icy. In Big Bear, it's very common to have very icy conditions. The only places that I had ever skied at was like Deer Valley, Park City, like gorgeous original snow. And so anyways, I get up to the top of the mountain, and I'm struggling getting down the entire mountain. And I'm really having to focus, and it's really icy. And the guys that I were skiing with, they were actually snowboarding, and they were really good, and which is frustrating. We talked about like wanting to perform and like wanting to be good. I was like, why can't I do this?
That's the
I wish
wrong mountain to have that thought on.
Thank you. That feels good. That's very
rough.
reassuring. It is rough. I know, right? And so anyways, I'm like halfway down the mountain, and in my mind, I'm like, dang, I wish I could just take my ski. You know what? And going back to like, we'll talk about intuition here, but like I told myself, I was like, damn, I wish I could just take my skis off right now and just walk down the rest of the mountain. You know why I didn't do it? Because I didn't want to like be a fucking loser.
Sure.
I didn't want to give up, which isn't always great. So anyways.
Was it for yourself? You felt like a loser,
Yes.
or you didn't in front of the other guys?
Both.
Yeah.
I was just like, why can't I get down this mountain? Skiing has never been hard for me.
Sure.
Why can't I get down the mountain? And so anyways, I make it almost all the way down to the bottom of the mountain. And in Big Bear, there's a bunch of different jumps. So there's like snowboard jumps, there's snow lips, and I was going really fast because it was really icy and I was just trying to get down because once I got to the bottom, I was going to take my skis off and just sit in the lodge.
Yeah.
And I was going really fast. I couldn't stop. And I hit a lip of snow and went probably maybe like 20 feet in the air. Luckily, there was nobody around me and I remember it all. And so I went all the way up, landed on my tailbone and had a whiplash injury and snapped my C5, C6 vertebrae, injuring my spinal cord, which left me paralyzed from the neck down. And the way that I landed, and like, I get this question all the time. People are like, oh, do you remember it? I'm like, I wish I didn't. Every minute, every second, every millisecond. And the way that I landed, I actually landed face down in the snow. And so when I couldn't move or I couldn't move my body at all. I couldn't feel my shoulders. I couldn't feel, it was such a surreal experience because I'm sitting face down in the snow and I'm like, why can't I move anything? I can't roll over and I'm like suffocating in the snow. And mind you, my friends, like I said, they were already all down there. So they just watched the whole thing happen, which is a deep level of trauma for them.
Yes.
As well. And so I can't get up. They're like, why can't you move? I'm like, I can't move. Maybe I broke my shoulders. Maybe I broke my legs. And then in my head, I'm like, did I break every single bone in my body? And quite naive for a 15-year-old, I'd never broken a bone before. In my life, I just got lucky with my spinal cord being the first one. And so anyways, then the EMTs come out and they put me on a stretcher and they're stabilizing my neck. And so they get me from the bottom of the mountain into the ambulance. And I remember sitting in the ambulance, had this really cute EMT. He had to be maybe like 22 years old, really sweet young man. And he's like, okay, I'm going to have to do a couple tests on you to determine whether we're going to take you to a trauma hospital, which is like stroke, traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injuries, et cetera, or if we can just take you to a general hospital. I'm like, okay. And so he's touching my big toe and I could see him touching my big toe. He's like, I'm going to have to squeeze your toe now. And he's like, I'm watching him squeeze it and I can't feel anything. And he's like, can you feel that? And I was like, mm-mm. And he did it again. He's like, this one. I'm like, nope. And then he moved to the other toe. Same thing. Can you feel it? And I said, nope. And the look that he gave me was it is like ingrained in my brain. It was such a look of fear and like he was trying to stay calm, but also like knowing what he knew as a paramedic, as a firefighter, whatever, like this, your life will never be the same after this moment. And I got that all from a look. And so from that, I couldn't have anybody come with me down the mountain. And so down the mountain in Big Bear, it's like going down like any mountain. It's quite a fun, twisty turnaround, sirens on, lights on, because I wasn't with my family and no immediate relatives. I had to go by myself. I'd never, like I said, let's like rewind for a second. I had never broken a bone before. Yeah. I'd never been away from my family. I've never gone to an ambulance, nothing. So I'm sitting in there.
Now all at once.
And I'm sitting in there and I'm thinking like, all I could think of is like, I'm going to miss like a softball tournament next weekend. Like if I broke my legs, if I broke my shoulders, like I'm not going to be able to play. And that's all I could think about. And then I get to the very bottom of the mountain and that's when the hyperventilation starts to kick in because I'm starting to experience all this shoulder pain right where my neck is. So like my C5, it's a pretty high injury. And so I'm getting all this pain in my shoulder, what I would later find to be called neurological pain. And it's like debilitating. Like it's almost like, think about if your legs fall asleep and then they wake up and it's kind of like, oh, they feel like ants and it's kind of throbby and itchy and burny, but like times a million. plus like hot. It's the best way I could describe it. And
Mhm.
so I'm starting to hyperventilate from the pain, and the sweet young paramedic's still with me. He's like, it's going to be okay. We're going to have to get you into the helicopter. I'm like, helicopter? So I had to go from the ambulance to the helicopter, and then I had to be helivac'd to the trauma hospital, which was called Loma Linda. It's in Riverside County.
And this
California.
is after they drove down the front side of the mountain.
Yeah. Like fast. I remember even just being back there and realizing how fast and how loud it was with the sound on, the sirens on. And so he's like, we're gonna have to get you in the helicopter. And I was like, I don't want to go in the helicopter. And he's like, we're gonna help you. It's gonna be okay. And you could just tell by the way he looked at me, it was like not gonna be okay. And so we get into the helicopter, and this is where I talked about the look that he gave me and how I'll always remember it. But this is a moment that will forever be a part of me and who I am. And it's what you call a near-death experience. So with a spinal cord injury, there's two easiest ways I can describe it. You have your software and your hardware. Your software is never going to work if your hardware doesn't work. And that's essentially what a spinal cord injury is. It's like damage to basically all of your essential organs below your level of injury. So for me, having an injury be so high on my cervical spine, it encompassed so many different things that are happening in my body. So I had one lung that was fully collapsed. But they didn't know at the time. And then I had another lung that was partially collapsed. So on top of everything that I was experiencing with the break and other things, I was also suffocating, which they thought that I was just hyperventilating.
Yeah.
So so I get into the helicopter, and everything, I lay back, and all I can remember is like everything was so white. And I'm like, oh, I kind of like in my head, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm fainting. And then it got even darker where I was like, maybe I'm dying. Like, maybe this is it. And then I started getting a little mad. I was like, well, this can't be like my time. Like, I'm 15 years old. I just, you know, I played like 7 softball games last weekend. And I also was like, you know, you have those moments where you're like, wow, I was kind of like mean to my sister.
Oh.
Like, I was kind of mean to my parents before I left. Or maybe I should have been nicer, or, you know, I wish I would have done more of that. And so I start spiraling on that, and then everything goes white. And I have about 25 seconds of complete and internal peace. And I didn't speak about that peace that I felt for like a decade because I didn't know what it was. And my next memory wasn't until I woke up after surgery. And
was that peace during surgery or before?
No, before.
Before.
So I had essentially, I don't know if the word like flatlined, but somewhat flatlined.
Sure.
Before they got me into the helicopter. And so I had to have like oxygen treatment and all of these other things before I went into surgery. And that was where I had that like X amount of seconds of that peace and somewhat of, I think, what people would describe it as a near-death experience.
So what do you say about it now? Now that you've thought about it?
I don't know what there is to say about it other than if you follow me on social media, there's so many people that write to me that are like, I love that you share your faith. I love that you share this, blah, blah, blah. I love that you're so open and you're so bold. And I'm like, but then I have people are like, why are you sharing about God? God isn't real. And I'm like, you could think God's not real, but you cannot convince me otherwise. You cannot convince me otherwise. And if you can try, but you cannot convince me otherwise. And I know because of what I experienced. And it's not like I went somewhere where it's like, it was, you know, I went beyond the pearly gates or whatever. It's like,
sure.
That's not the definition of eternal. It's not. And where I spent time, it's still hard to talk about.
Yeah.
It's still really, really hard to talk about because I also just thought that for a really long time, I was like, people are going to think I'm crazy if I talk about it.
I think peace is a great descriptive for people to think about because if you have peace, that means you're without worry, you're without pain, you're without anxiety.
Pain is a big one. Yeah.
Fear. You know, you're without fear.
Mm-hmm. I didn't want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the thing I remember telling my mom, and she was the only person that I told. And I remember telling her like, I didn't want to leave. I don't understand why I got to experience that. And then I had to come back here. And, you know, and I know it's really heavy.
Wow.
And I just didn't understand. I couldn't understand it.
It is. And it's a perfect description of that experience. Perfect. Like to a T, what I've experienced personally, what I know every other person that I've ever spoken to that has had an experience like that has explained it like it's perfect. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Like,
yeah. And I think for myself as well, like, so going into my next memory, which was waking up after my surgery, and I was really lucky I didn't have to be intubated, which is very common for a lot of spinal cord injury cervical victims. They have to have a tube into their throat, their trach, so they could breathe. I was lucky I didn't have to do that, but what I did have to do was breathing treatments like every hour. So not only, and I think people think about like, oh, well, having a spinal cord injury, your biggest thing is that you can't walk. Like, I fucking wish, you know how easy it would have been if that was my biggest worry. Like, oh, you had to learn how to walk again. No, I had to learn how to breathe again. I had to learn how to sit up again. I had to learn to eat again. I had to learn to hold a fork. At 15 years old, when you're supposed to be going into experiencing independence and getting your permit, I was learning how to breathe independently.
Wow.
And so that was my next memory. Was, I don't know how detailed you want to get in the hospital, but it was dark.
Yeah. Oh. Man, I don't know if it's appropriate to say I'm sorry that happened to you, but being a father, I can't help it. That's
yeah, thank you.
It's incredible. What did they do in surgery?
I had a fusion surgery.
Okay.
So they fused part of my C5 vertebrae was broken off, and then part of my C6 vertebrae wasn't completely severed, but it was poking out into my spinal canal. So what they had to do was they had to fuse them together. So I have little like somebody else's bone fragments in there to just make it kind of aligned and back together. But I didn't have to have like a rod or a bar or anything like that.
So was that piece that came off, was that what got the nerve?
Yeah. So the spinal cord, luckily for me, I'm an incomplete injury, which means that my spinal cord was bruised. But if you're bruising it, you're still, impacting it, which is why I had the paralysis. But a lot of people that have spinal cord injuries actually get complete injuries, which is a complete sever, which means that their hope for recovery is a lot harder than an incomplete injury.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about that then.
Yeah.
But I would like to know, you mentioned you're going to the hospital for the first time in an ambulance, with a broken bone of some sort, that whole thing you described, alone. So you get to the hospital. How did your parents kind of come into the mix, and how did that kind of set in?
The first time that I saw them, that I remember seeing them, was after surgery. And I was so messed up on so much medication and other things. It's very, very, very blurry. Sure. And I just remember my mom, and because I'm 15 years old, you have to also remember that like I can't make any medical decisions really like for myself. Like, and nor am I able to. And also, can you imagine your daughter being 15 years old being like, oh yeah, I need to do more of this, or I want to have less medication. What medication like protocol? You don't know any of that. Right. And I'm lucky. Like I had my mom and my dad that were with me every step of the way, but I also have an aunt who's a doctor who was like, the amount of medication that they put you on is the same for every spinal cord injury victim. So like if you had a spinal cord injury, a cervical injury like me, we essentially would probably get the same amount of medication. We would both get an SSRI. We would both get something to sleep. We would probably get something for anxiety. We would get something for pain. We would get something for bladder control. Like the list goes on. But there's so many medications on there that I did not need to be on. And I was really lucky that I had quite fierce caregivers and protectors in my family that helped me with that.
Oh, for sure. We were talking about, RFK and Maha coming in. And I think a big part of that is going to be to raise awareness for people on how much medication they're taking. They probably don't need all the junk that's in their food that they're taking, and all just the pollutants that are around us, even from digital, from the food, the water, all the different things we're taking. I can't imagine being in a hospital and getting a list of medications they think you're going to be on. I just went in the other day. I just ripped a heart monitor off my chest the other day that I had on because my heart was starting to, I had a little, you know what a PVC is?
Yeah.
That just like switched on for me. PVCs on the first. It was the craziest thing for like 4 days straight. So I went in and got it going. But I actually think him and our other business partner probably solved it with a severe vitamin D deficiency, believe it or not. But while I'm in there, this obese doctor is talking to me about about medication without knowing anything about me other than I'm in shape, but still just talking medication. She didn't, talk about vitamin D that he found. She didn't talk about anything else. I can't imagine the list of stuff they gave you. And I'm so glad you had family and aunt and all that to kind of, bounce that off of, because that's insane.
They would have left me. If I would have done everything that traditional Western medicine provided for me when I was 15 years old, I would be living on Social Security. I would be stuck in victim land. I would be on an SSRI, antidepressant medication. I would be on a benzodiazepine for anxiety. I would be a shell of my potential and my former self. Yeah. And I would have not a fraction of who I am and what I do today if I lived on that protocol.
Oh, for sure.
But that's the biggest thing though. And I hope that people get from our conversation together. It's like, there is so much more out there, but it's like, people just, you don't have to do what people tell you. And like, for me, like with my injury, it's like, they told me, they're like, oh yeah, well, she's likely going to have to live dependent on her parents, financially, physically, everything. She'll probably never heal. She'll probably never drive. She'll probably never go to college. And it's like, none of those things were true. But you know how damaging that is for even just like young parents and also like a young girl. My mom is such a shark. She's so crazy and in the best way possible. But we had this doctor one morning when I moved from rehab, when I moved from inpatient to step down, which is basically like I wasn't in ICU, but I was still in intensive care in the hospital. And we had this doctor come in, and I was really lucky because on my right side of my body, I had a little bit of movement after like 6 weeks on my right big toe. And it was a big deal because it's like you're getting a signal all the way down from your brain to your toe on command. And I wiggled my toe, and everyone was so excited to see this doctor in the morning. And you know what he said to me? Like dead ass, right on.
I can imagine.
That's most likely a reflex, and even dead people can do that. My mom took that man outside and wrung him a new one. And you know what he did the next day? He came in with a smile and his whole demeanor changed, looked me straight in the eye, and was a human. But like, isn't that crazy? You have a 15-year-old patient and you're coming in here talking to her. I can't even tell you what I would have done to a doctor, male or female, if they said that. Are you kidding me? It's like, I'm a human, not a robot.
Yes.
I'm having the most horrific experience of my life. And that's how you talk to me? Get out of here.
It's so wild because, and we'll talk about your mindset, because you take somebody who has not had an injury like that and tell them they'll never go to college and never do all these things. That will mess with that 15-year-old for sure.
Yeah.
But then you take somebody who's going through something so traumatic physically, and you're all these uncertainties and you're scared and all this stuff, major injury going on, and also tell them that it's like, I can't fathom doing that. That is so wrong.
I know. I think you just don't know what other people are capable of. No. And that's the biggest thing. Like, you have no idea what other people are capable of. So like, as a doctor, if you have a doctor that's telling you like, hey, like XYZ, whatever, and your doctor should be your coaches in your care.
Yeah.
It is a dual partnership. They should be coaches in your care, not like judgment day. That's not for them to decide.
I was just up in Utah. My niece was in the hospital. She had like super pneumonia, like really. She had a tube stuffed in her side and all this stuff, and she's 4. She turned 4 in the hospital, actually. So she was 3 when it happened, but she's 4, and the doctor comes in. They were having a lot of complications. They put the tube in the wrong spot in her lung, and it was all them. It was like they fucked up. Like the emergency room fucked up, then the surgeon fucked up, and it was like this cascade of doctor fuck ups, right?
Right.
And it was their fault, but they came into the room, and she understands everything. She's very smart, and she's laying there on the bed, super fucking scared, and like trying to have a smile on her face and watching The Grinch for the 100th time. And and the doctor comes in, and my brother, her dad, and I are standing there, and he's like telling us all the stuff, and he's being very like matter of fact, like, she might have this tube forever, and like it might be like something that she's got to deal with a long time. And she's sitting there, and I look over and I'm like, can we have this conversation outside? Like, can we fucking talk about this? She knows what you're saying. She's not stupid.
Right.
And I told him that too. And, almost got kicked out of the hospital, but,
good.
But I can't even imagine like it's, And that's, you're a number when you go to the hospital
Big time.
in America, especially. You go in and it's just next, they come in, they're like, look at the chart, look at you and go, too bad. And they walk out and it's like,
that was my experience.
Yeah.
So for so many doctors, and it's really disheartening because it's like we talked about, those are pivotal moments. And we talk about, kind of like being a young adult and going into your adulthood. It's like, if I didn't have people that were around me, and we can talk about the power of like your circle and why it's so important, but it's like, if I didn't have people around me that protected me and were like, hey, don't listen to them, that's not how it's going to be. And then, shaping the way that they spoke to me.
Yeah.
Because it's like a 4-year-old's not going to snap back and be like, hey, don't talk to me like that. And to be honest, 15, I didn't do that either.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it would be a different story now, but when I was that age, it's like you are taught as a young woman, as a young daughter, to obey and be a good girl. And that never served me well.
I had that in
my injury.
To give you a contrast too, I had the same experience with a doctor when I was 25. I have rods and stuff in my lower back, and there was a conversation that I had with my neurosurgeon. He was a very good doctor too.
Yeah.
But the conversation was still, you're never going to lift weights again. You're never, these are the things you're never going to do. He didn't give me the list of like, hey, here's all the stuff that went right.
Right. They never do.
And it was like, here's all the things you can't do ever again. And it's still, I was 25, but it still took months to be like, no. Like, and I sent him a video like later on of me doing some stuff that he told me not to do. And I was like,
yeah,
and he laughed at it.
Oh,
And he
I
was
love
like,
that so much.
So, but even at a 25-year-old man who was, I was in the military, I was in the Marine Corps, 25 years old, been to war a couple times. Like even then the doctor telling me like, so I can't even imagine.
Well, Goggin talks about that. David Goggins talks about this all the time, is like, there are two voices, roads of dialogue in your head. It's like, there's that internal voice that everybody has of like, when you're doing something like, oh, I'm not really that good at that, or I can be better at that, or, so-and-so's way better at that than I am. And then there's that other voice, which is not talked about enough. It's like the voice of reason, but also the voice of pushing you in a little bit, where you're like, hey, you're not that good right now, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get there. But no, we don't work on conditioning that voice. We're so focused on, I'm not this, I'm not that, I can never be that. So they never really meet at a crossroads, and you don't ever get the choice to be able to like, we're going to go down this road. So like for you, example with the doctor, it's like, hey, like I've done all of these things. I've gone to war. What have you done?
Yeah. This
is what I'm capable of. And having that voice, it's like, that has served me, like my entire life.
Along those lines, I'd like to know like about the incomplete versus a complete injury. Do they know that like right away after it happens, or is this something that develops? And also second part is like, what does that mean? Are you still recovering, healing in a way? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah. So an incomplete injury, like I said, means that you essentially have like a bruise or a dent to your spinal cord. It's not completely severed. Okay. Versus a complete injury is a complete break of the spinal cord, which means that it is diagnosed early on. So like right before I went into surgery, they obviously had to do an x-ray to see where the break was and everything. That's where they determine what that looks like. So there's different classes of incomplete injuries. It's something called an Asia scale. So Asia A is essentially like a noodle. So like if you're looking at me right now, you probably think that I present more as a paraplegic because I have movement of my arms and I can move my body and whatnot. But when I was early injured, I had no movement from the neck down. So I couldn't move my arms, I couldn't move my hands, and I also had no feeling. Aside from the nerve pain that I had in my neck, I had no feeling all the way down. Great second question about if that can change. Absolutely. So being an incomplete injury, you are more likely to have it change a little bit because you don't have a sever. With the sever, it's not to say things can't change and you can't move from an Asia scale of incomplete A complete A all the way to Asia D, which means that you have feeling and movement, etc. But currently right now, I am an incomplete Asia C, which means that I have movement, feeling, pain below my injury.
Okay. And is there any sort of potential technology that's coming out to fix this? Like, is it like a stem cell type thing or like what? What is coming down the line that you're looking at?
Neuralink.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard the
We need
Neuralink.
to call Elon. Andy, call Elon.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really great technology, specifically for quadriplegics. So like I said, quadriplegics, what that means is you have 4 limbs that are impacted versus paraplegic, where usually they're just, they're paralyzed or numb from the waist down or the injury site down. But stem cells are quite promising. There's also a bunch of different robotic therapy that's also been quite promising. And the best way that what is the word for him? It's a physiatrist. He's my spine doctor, but he's super into all of this. And he's always trying to get me. He's like, Natalie, you need to join these like groups and whatever. And I'm like, I got a job. I got to work. I can't just like go to the hospital for like, 3 months and be a test dummy, even though it would be really cool to document and share with my audience. But there's a lot of promise with stem cells and neuroregenerative works and whatnot.
That's great.
All the stuff we're not allowed to do in the United States right now.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
And also, I think the biggest thing for a lot of people that are spinal cord injury victims is to be able to continue to move their body and stay healthy, stay in a healthy weight. There's also a lot of things, having a spinal cord injury, like developing like metabolic syndrome where, you're sitting all the time, which is really easy to get. So things like that, optimizing your health, biohacking.
Well, I'm very curious about that. Yeah. One of the things that we do is we do Earn It All Health. We, fitness, nutrition, and the mindset around being healthy and stuff like that. So what other things you do? Because you are in great shape.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So what are you doing?
So kind of like going back to my early physical therapy days, I tried standard physical therapy. So this was so in the United States, currently, we give people that have traumatic brain injuries, stroke, spinal cord injuries, the same amount of physical therapy a year.
Wonderful.
Just like the same standard medications.
So helpful.
Yeah.
You want to know how many sessions we get for being paraplegic or quadriplegic?
Oh, God.
A year. So these are think 1 hour workout sessions. Guess how many we get? And covered by insurance.
Oh man, 50, 100?
65.
Yeah.
65. Yeah, it's an absolute joke. So what my parents and I did was we found some incredible, more athlete-focused, outside-the-box rehabilitation centers that I went to every single day. So I was homeschooled partially through the second half of my high school experience because I was doing extensive physical therapy. And I went to this amazing place called Project Walk. It was down in Carlsbad. And they put me on a spin bike. They had a bunch of young guys, actually a lot of former Marines, and they just, we trained like I was still an athlete. I lifted weights. I used parts of my body that still I couldn't feel, but I had other people helping me do it. Physical therapy in America traditionally only focuses on things that you do have. Well, I was a quadriplegic. I had nothing, no movement, no feeling, nothing. So what were we going to focus on? Think about, you want to know what they had me do? One of my first sessions.
Fuck's sake.
No, get ready because it will really it will actually make you want to throw your water across the room. They put a bowl of marbles on the table. Mind you, I can't open or close my hands. I can't move my arms. And you want to know what they wanted me to do? Pick up the fucking marbles. Do you know what kind of sorcery that does to your mind? Of think about moving your hands to pick up the marble. Think about moving your hands to pick up the marble. It is a level of psychological warfare that I had to experience. And so I got to go to an amazing place and do all of the things that that my body couldn't do. Like I said, ride a spin bike, stand, stretch, move around, lift weights, etc. Isn't that crazy?
No, just think about it. I think about it every fucking second.
Every second of every
I'm
day.
always thinking about it.
I know.
Oh my God.
It's just, it's so wild, but it's but being able to do that. And now we have an incredible personal trainer that lives across the street from us. And he's also, Grady, correct me if I'm wrong. What kind of weightlifter is he? Bodybuilder. He's insane. You guys have a great conversation with him. But he's the same way. He just looks at me. He's like, come on, Nat, we're going to lift these weights. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Some of the things I'm doing in my chair, some of the things I'm standing for. And I think where I've gotten in my life has always been around people that thought like that thought outside of the box, that are hey, it's okay if you can't do it this way. It's okay if you can't sit in the machine this way. We're going to finagle it. We're going to make it work. And through repetition, I've gotten stronger because of it. And my body still, from the second part of your question, it's my body's still continuing to change
Yeah.
in terms of mobility, function, etc. And yeah, but like
Wow.
I've been in my chair now longer than I was standing on 2 feet, which is psychologically really interesting to think about. Because a lot of people that meet me for the first time, they're like, oh, did you break your leg? I'm like, I wish.
Yeah.
That would have been sick.
What does it feel like when you notice like maybe some extra mobility or movement or I don't know, feeling or something?
It's interesting because I think when you're in it all the time, you don't really notice it that much.
Okay.
But like with my fiance, like we talk about it a lot because we've been together for 10 years. And it's like, even when we first started dating, there was so many things that like I couldn't do, or I needed extra help with, or almost it was like embarrassing to ask for help, which
Sure.
was a really big level of letting, even just like dating in general, like letting people in of like, I've only ever had people in my family help me with these very personal things in my life.
Yeah.
And so, but he always like point things out like, oh, wow, that was like really easy. Or like, oh, your hands are like so much more better at X, Y, Z. And I'm like, and then I think about it, I'm like, yeah, you know what? They kind of are.
Yeah.
That's kind of dope. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I can.
But it's hard when you're close to it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like even with somebody like working out, trying to like get in better shape or something,
Totally.
they don't really see it.
You need the progress pics.
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally. Yeah, exactly
The
right.
cheesy mirror progress pics.
Yep.
I'm unashamed.
Yeah.
That's right.
Unashamed.
That was going to be my question along those lines was when you do, let's say, what was the first big milestone that you got to in your mind? Like, what was it? Was it the toe or was it
The
something
toe.
else? It was the toe.
So the toe was the first big movement. And then the second big thing was learning how to sit up for longer than like 20 minutes.
Mhm.
Because what they would do is they would put me, I joked, I used to call it like my Hannibal Lecter chair, but they would put me in this wheelchair and like they would just be like, you have to sit up for 20 minutes. And mind you, my abs couldn't contract.
Mhm.
So like think about like trying to like breathe. Like I had no ab feeling or movement. So my belly was kind of always like a puppy. You know, puppies kind of have that
Sure.
relaxed,
Mhm.
bigger belly.
Sure.
That's like what I was. They call it quad belly actually, because you don't have any like tightness, which is different now. But when I was first starting out, I would faint all the time. So I had really low
Wow.
blood pressure. I would faint all the time.
Yeah.
And it was always something that made me like so self-conscious because I remember I would go out with friends and we would go to the movies or something and I would be like, I have to wear my abdominal binder so I don't faint. I need help getting in and out of the car. I can't, everything was so hard. And I talk about that all the time on my channel. It's like, being sick is really hard.
Yeah.
Working out a lot is really hard. Feeling sorry for yourself is really hard. Doing really hard things is, also uncomfortable. But my whole life is uncomfortable. I would never be anywhere if I just sat in my discomfort.
Mhm.
Everything I do from the second I wake up in the morning,
Right.
when I maneuver my legs over my bed and I've been in a tight ball all night and my body hurts and it's like, I'm just not going to get out of bed in the morning. No, I'm going to get out of bed in the morning. You have to move through. But that's been like my biggest motto and my biggest lesson in life is just like continue to move forward. Like progress is progress, no matter how slow it is.
That is more
And it's
powerful.
quite slow for me.
Yeah. That's more powerful than anything I've ever heard Goggins say. I mean,
Yeah.
people get sick or they get an injury and at some point it's over and they're not sick anymore and the leg is healed from the break or whatever.
Mhm.
You like that had a major change that has just stayed with you. And I'm glad you're making progress, but I can't imagine, the mindset that you have to smile and to keep going through that and saying every day I do this and admitting, even simple things like getting up and moving out of bed. This isn't something that, like a lot of people, they go through tough seasons of life, but you've been doing this now for almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So how have you developed your mind to be here smiling and looking bright as day and like, and just being such a positive person? That's remarkable.
I think every single day when I wake up, I mean, we talked a little bit about my faith, but my earthly life is only a fraction preparing me for my eternal one. And I know that. And I knew that from my early experience that we talked about. I was a Christian before I got hurt and I've always known that. But every single day, I talk to so many people that live for this world and are miserable.
Yes.
And they look at me like exactly what you just said. And I hear that all the time. Like, you're so positive. You have so much energy. You have so much light about you. Why? Why aren't you mad at God? Why aren't you resentful? Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you pissed at your circumstances? Well, I've already lost so much. I've lost so much. I don't want to lose anymore.
Yeah.
And my mind is the only thing for the longest period of time in my life that I had control over. The only thing. All of my limbs, even my internal organs, I didn't have control over. And it felt so weird because it's like, I always felt like a fish out of water, even before I got hurt. Like I always felt like athletically, I always was super competitive. Like we talked about the difference between like being more like very like female, feminine versus being more masculine and competitive and whatnot. And I always felt so different from that. And then going into my injury, I'm like, wow, now I'm take that out of the equation because I'm not doing that anymore. But now I really feel like a fish out of water. Every place that I roll into, I have to research if it's handicap accessible, just like I did today with you guys. And I'm stared at every place that I roll into because unlike you guys can wear all your problems in here. Mine are quite visible for commentary, for feedback to everybody that I walk in. And usually my disability is somewhat of a conversation starter. And I'll never forget when I was in college. Men specifically, that's like their way that they like to hit on, like to flirt. And I remember one guy came up to me, it's like after a football game, and he asked me, he's like, if I was faking it, if I was just being lazy today. And one of my best friends, he's like, let me out of Natalie. Like, he wanted to take him out. And I just was like, you know what? Yeah. I can't even process that. No, that's not even the worst one either. I gave you kind of like a vanilla one for the pod, but like well,
there's no rules here. You can say whatever you want.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I also had another guy too that asked me what it was like physically to be with someone in this situation. That was the first conversation I ever had with him. And I said, you're never going to find out because of that comment. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And I was like 18 maybe at the time.
Yeah.
And luckily I'm very quick. Yeah. I can snap back really quick and I feel no shame or apologies for it. But it's like, I wear it all on the outside. And the only thing that I have control over is my mind, and it has taken an obscene amount of conditioning and decisions every single morning that I'm going to live in the present. I'm not going to live in what was. Mm-hmm. And I'm also not going to go too far in what I want to do, what I can be, because then I lose where I'm at. Mm-hmm. And there's a great book called The Gap and the Gain. I love it. Have you guys read it?
He has.
Love it.
It's an amazing book.
4 pages in, I text the guy who gave it to me and I was like, what the fuck? Yeah,
you're hitting me like straight in between the eyes. But basically it talks about the gap, and it's kind of like the dash, if you've read The Secret, but it's like the gap essentially of being a high achiever and wanting to go somewhere, and being so focused on the future that you forget all it's taken you to get where you're at right now. And I always tell people that on my channel, I'm like, you guys, you have so much, but you're not grateful for it because you don't acknowledge it. And you don't acknowledge it because you're not present in what is. And I feel like I'm a very present person.
I had a really, really powerful experience this past weekend that solidified that for me, because one of the reasons why that book resonated so hard with me is because I'm very hard on myself on certain things.
Yeah.
Especially leadership wise, and growing up without a father and then not being able to be a father, we were talking about earlier, and just the whole thing. And the experience was kind of a manifestation of the gap and the gain, where, during the breath work that we did, I'll Cliff Notes version it because it's very long, but I'll just Cliff Notes version it. Was surrounded by my ancestors, and I was trying to figure out what was the next battle or hard thing that I had to do, or what's the next test that I need to do in order to feel worthy of this thing that I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. And essentially the message was, what the fuck are you talking about? You're already there.
Right.
Like there is no more test. Like for this specific thing, there is no more test. There is no more, you're already in the game. Like stop looking for the gaps. You're already here.
Totally.
And that's the, I don't know where I was going with that, but anyways,
no,
resonate.
It's so important. Yeah. Well, I think it's also, we live in a very in-your-face social media society where constantly everyone's displaying their highlight reels. So the second you wake up in the morning, you open your phone, you're like, so-and-so is in Belize. Elon Musk just started a new car. You know what I mean? And it's straight up in your face, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm not doing enough. Or the lower level thought of that is I'm not enough, which is something that we talk about on the podcast that I produce all the time with Dr. Daniel Amen. He's a psychiatrist, and he has seen some of the most well-known celebrities, and this is public knowledge, so I can share it. People like Justin Bieber, Miley Cyrus, and the people that we've had on our show as well. When you ask about like, what is a really deep, we can get really deep for a second, but what is a very deep negative thought that you have about yourself? And I'll start. Mine for the longest time was I'm a burden because of my situation. And in my deep moments of victim land, if things would be easier for my family, financially, emotionally, for everything, if my situation didn't happen and this didn't happen to me. And where does that leave me? In a puddle of victim land, in shame. And where can I grow from there? In quicksand. But all the celebrities that we have on our show say the same thing. And these are people that have billionaires. And you know what theirs is? I'm not enough. Why? Because we live in a spiritual warfare, purposeful-less society, surrounded by things that aren't important. And so we can start with yours if you guys want to share, because I got really deep there. So I feel like it's only fair.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I can go. One thing that has been, kind of plagued me for a while that I would say I'm basically over, 99% over, but it's really held me back a lot in my life, is not thinking that I'm good enough to be doing what I'm actually doing.
Right.
Like as I'm doing it, I have full confidence, with what I do, talk strong and all that. But in the back of my mind, like, nope, someone else is better at this, or this isn't actually going to pan out the way it is because of me.
Right.
And it's terrible to think like that, especially when you're in like a business that you put so much time, energy, and money and all the things and emotion and everything into. And then in the back of your head, you're always kind of telling yourself, no, you're not good enough to be doing this.
Yeah, you're striking yourself out before you even get in the batter's box.
100%.
Yeah.
So thankfully, like along the lines he just said, that was a big breakthrough that I literally just had this past week at our men's retreat, was overcoming that and like, no, and like stepping fully into like, I know how good I am. Right. I know how well I can speak and how I can deliver and I can help other people. I know who I am and I know I'm phenomenal at what I do.
Right.
And that little kind of bitch voice, if you will, is basically snuffed out literally as of just 2 days ago.
That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine is essentially the same in different words and in different meaning. And that was the experience that I had over the weekend as well, was, we're putting on this experience for all these men. And who am I to be sitting up on the front? And we're not facilitating, quote unquote, because we're doing everything with them.
Right.
So that kind of gives me an out, right? Where it's like, oh, well, I'm not a facilitator. I'm just here, sharing a little bit and also in participating. And, I don't know how to lead because I've never been led the right way. I didn't have a father. And I read this whole essay to the men at the retreat, actually. And that was like a breakthrough for me because I never shared any of that stuff. It took me like 7 years to write this essay about all the things that, I didn't get to learn with a father. There was things in, like how to grill a steak. I actually grill a really good steak now, and I learned it on my own.
I'll be the judge of that.
And it was,
I'm just kidding.
Let's go. Where's the grill? Like I'm in, like I'm full confidence on that.
I love it.
But it was the leadership part that I was like, I questioned myself on because it's like, well, when am I going to, what's the next hard thing that I need to do in order to find that?
Right.
And, and there wasn't anything. There is no next thing. It's like, no. You just had, 22 guys tell you personally that you changed their lives. Like step into that.
Big time.
And it was really hard to do.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's also one thing that I hope people can take away from all of us sharing those really intimate details of our inner beliefs or past inner beliefs, is that we were all made wonderfully, uniquely made by our Creator. Exactly who we are right now is who we were supposed to be and what we were supposed to go through. And we all possess unique gifts. And I hope one day when my time here is done that I could look confidently in front of our Creator and say, I did everything that I could with my yappy, bold mouth about my gifts in order to be in service of other people because of what you gave me. And for people listening that are experiencing anything similar to what, we all shared, we all have those thoughts, but those thoughts aren't always facts. Inner beliefs aren't always facts, even if you tell them to yourself.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're very hard with ourselves. We tell ourselves a lot of bullshit all the time.
Totally.
You
And
know?
genetically, like we were talking about with you, it's like, there's a lot of things that you get passed on.
Mhm.
Addiction runs deep in families. The way that you were brought up or lack thereof. I mean,
Right.
it's not something that you just, you're 18 and you're good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not an issue anymore. It's like, no, these are core fundamental things that you grew up for years with.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned that being created, which we also believe, and you grew up being a Christian before your accident. Even throughout the last however many years it's been, how many years has it been since your accident?
long. I got injured in 2008.
Yeah. Okay. So a long time.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a period of time where you were doubting or angry at God?
Not that I was mad or angry at God, but I was desperately wanting to be like everybody else. And in my opinion, that is somewhat being subliminally angry at God,
Mhm.
because it's subliminally being angry at why am I the way that I am and being mad at the way that you created me to be. And I remember in high school, even before I got hurt, I was always a well-liked person, popular, whatever, and sports. And I never had trouble making friends, but like I cared so deeply, like we all do, about being liked and
Sure.
whatever. And then that didn't just go away after I got injured. After I got injured, it almost became worse because I've somewhat became like celebrity-like. Like my story was very followed. And every time I went somewhere in my hometown, it was like people knew me and they knew my family. And then it just became worse because then I cared even more
Mhm.
about all of it. And so it got even more amplified. And I remember nights when I would go to bed, I would be like, gosh, like I wish I could just go to the grocery store and not be stared at. And I wish that I could just go out with my friends and not be the disabled one. And I wish I could do all these things. And, that thought as well, like plagued me for quite some time, because then when you think things like that and you act as they are fundamentally true in your life, then you don't do things.
Mhm.
So then it's like, oh, well, then I'm not going to go to that concert because, it's going to be easier if I'm not there. Or what if something isn't accessible? And it's like, it snowballs. So I think that was a big thing that I had to work through, was that like fundamental belief that I wish that I could be like everybody else.
Was that your natitude that you started to come up
That's a
with?
good segue.
Yeah.
My natitude started when I was playing sports, and that was my nickname. And it always was
Okay.
because I just had a like competitiveness and a zest for playing, and a little bit of a sassy attitude, and I'm going to do it even if you tell me I can't do it. I'm going to prove people wrong. So that's where that started, and then paralleled into my injury. And I think into my adult life as well, because it's funny. We talked a little bit about people saying things to me, like as I walk into rooms, or even
Mhm.
like men trying to flirt with me or whatever. And like I have friends that are like, I'm gonna take some out, and I'm like, you know what? Their opinion, feedback, projections that they throw onto me has absolutely nothing to do with me.
No.
Has everything to do with them. But that took me years of creating my own exposure therapy, of putting myself in uncomfortable positions. And by uncomfortable positions, I mean quite literally going to the movies, going to a concert, going to Stagecoach, doing all these things that are seemingly fun things, festivals, whatever, that weren't always fun for me
Yeah.
because of my situation and having to get around. But
Oh,
yeah.
I can totally see it. Especially it happened at 15. You had a lot of life up until 15,
Right.
And then having all the things you like to do be completely different and changed. The natitude that you need for that, I think you need to be kind of sassy and witty, and you have to be a fighter, in my opinion. I would think, I'm just kind of assuming here, but,
yeah.
because I can see someone that has maybe a different personality where they are maybe, a little more passive, or they're not as aggressive. I can see them not making the leaps and bounds and achieving the success that you have.
I think so too, but I also think that there is a certain level of privilege, like I talked about before, that I encompass with my circle. Like I had a lot of people in my life where, like I talked about, even like in a crowded room with all my problems on the outside with my chair, I also had moments of feeling very alone, even though I wasn't, just because I was so different. And so I always remembered thinking like, I met a lot of men because a lot of men get spinal cord injuries because they're a lot more adventurous like me. But I didn't meet a lot of females. So I didn't have a lot of people that I could like really connect with.
Sure.
And some of the females that I did meet, they were like much older and, you know, automobile accidents, other things. And so I didn't really have a lot in common. And so I did have very isolating moments and experiences. But like going back to the Natitude, that was something that, like I said, going back to the mindset, that's like all I had. Like that's all I had control over. And it's like, if I didn't do things or I didn't go places, or if I was like, you know, I'm just going to live in victim land, then it's like, that's strike three.
Is that something you just thought on your own, or were you listening to podcasts or books, or like
I don't think podcasts were
that?
a real thing. I mean, I was like 15.
Yeah, probably not.
You know what I mean? I'm going to age myself. We had MySpace. Like we had like my top 8. The music was pretty insane on there.
Sure.
But
because I'm asking that again because man, I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine. And especially seeing today, like how weak-willed and weak-minded a lot of kids are. You know, anything throws them off. They don't get PS5. They're yelling at grandma.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. We live in a complaining culture.
Yes.
People complain to connect.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me sick.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me sick.
100%.
You know why? Because I have absolutely nothing in common with somebody that walks up to me and the first thing, if we shook hands today and the first thing you said was, oh gosh, oh the weather, oh this and that, I'm like thinking to myself, oh, we're going to have a long podcast to talk about because we're going to have a lot of mindset shifts happening and breakthroughs. But the complaining culture is so rampant in our society. And when you have everything taken away from you physically, that's all you can do is show up for yourself mentally. And I can't, I have no space for that in my life. But like, I think a lot of like children as well, building mental tenacity and fortitude in themselves. There's a lot of parents, and I'm going to say this, I'm not a parent yet, so like, don't come at me in the comments with this one, but parents do too much for their children.
Yes.
And then by doing that, they're not giving them any space to create that competency, to then create their own confidence. And you know why parents do that? It's because they're boosting their own self-esteem by doing everything for their children. And I didn't have parents that did that. Yeah. My parents did a lot for me, but they put all of that back on me. They also cheered me on. I also had a lot of friends that didn't exclude me, and they made space for me. Like if we were going to go kayaking, I had a friend who had like a stand-up paddleboard. I didn't have enough balance to like sit in a kayak. And so he built something that I actually got to like roll on top of. I didn't go very far, but like the thought of being included went so far with me. And so, but your circle really matters. If you're around people that complain all the time or bring you down or whatever, it's like, it is just so freaking contagious. People are contagious, and I just don't have space for that.
How does somebody become worthy enough of being in your circle? Because I have to imagine, I'm just going to assume a little bit here, but I'll try to get a question out of it. You know, when people, you know, say they want to help or they want to be in your circle, they want to be around, I have to imagine there's been people that over time, the inconvenience or whatever with, you know, your mobility, they actually were not worthy of being in your circle. So.
Oh, big time. And, you know, I think that was a lesson I learned really early on because like I said, I had a lot of incredible friends from like childhood all the way on that stuck around. Yeah. But then I had people, and I always joke that my mom and my parents are always right, but they always had this people, why are you spending time with those people? They don't care. Before my injury, they don't have your best interest at heart, you know, blah, 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 blah. No, whatever. And guess what? People were the first people to go. When things got rough, right? Yeah. But I think being a good friend isn't about being there when it's convenient. It's about being there when it's not.
Totally.
And the people that stuck around in my life and that are still in my, like my best friend, Rachel, who I grew up with, I was a maid of honor at her wedding. You know, I'm the godmother to her children. And it's like those people, they make it work despite what you can or can't do. And like I said, showing up for people, she's always shown up for me, but there's a lot of people that were like, I can't deal with this. And I don't hold anything against them for that. I imagine that I don't know how I would have reacted being 15 years old and pretty emotionally immature. But I've had people that have come up to me or even like messaged me later, years later throughout my injury and have said like, I'm sorry, I was a really bad friend at a time where you needed it. And I'm like, it's okay. I don't, like I said, I feel like you would probably think by talking with me that I'm like, maybe like aggressive or a grudge holder or anything like that. And I just couldn't be I couldn't be any further from that.
I don't pick up on that.
I don't, again, like that's space for somebody to hold if they want to hold that themselves, but it's not my job to hold space for that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really just amazed at your mindset here. And just thinking about how many kids have a little bit wrong in their life, whether it's a PS5 or they're skinny or they're fat or they're, whatever. And they can't get out of their own way because of it. I really hope that more people can see you and learn from you and hear you, because it's like, man, the mind is everything. Like you said, I'd love that you said that. Like the mind is the only thing you could control for a while. So let me get a control of it. Let me work on that. It's fascinating. And I don't know, man.
I think there's always, I think the best thing too to leave people with as well is like, change is the only constant.
Yeah.
And, if you think, and I think it's really easy when you're in a position where you're not happy with yourself, that this is all I'm ever going to be. My situation is never going to change. I'm always going to be fat. I'm always going to be this. I'm never going to get there. But I think for myself, like I've always focused on, again, like trying to be the best version of myself, not in competition with anybody else, and focusing on being a percentage better each day. And by that percentage, it just means giving 100% of whatever I have that day. I could be like, I have 10%, but I'm going to give 100 of that 10. And that started early in team sports and just has carried me in my life, beyond.
I mean, that's incredible. I don't know if you probably do, actually. I was about to say, I don't know if you know how rare your mindset is for anybody. Men, women, able body, if that's appropriate to say. Like most people do not have this mindset that you have.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Thank you very much. I wonder, and this is a very like late night thought that you think sometimes you're like, what would I be like? And let's let all listeners consider this for a second, but like, what would I be like if I didn't have this traumatic injury happen? Or in another example, if I didn't lose that person, if that person didn't break up with me, I didn't get rejection, whatever it may be. And I've thought deeply about that before. And I've thought, man, would I be as resilient, or would I not sweat the small stuff? And the question is like, who knows? But what I do know is I'm not going to spend time back there because I'm not there anymore. That version of Natalie, and I always like joke with people that it's like after my injury happened, it's like I became like in a little egg, and then I got cracked open, and then I came out a new version of myself, a reborn version of myself. And embracing that has been the biggest challenge. But it's been a really rewarding one. And I think the biggest thing is like in sharing my story and wanting to share deeply and openly is that I would love for people to be able to listen to me. And if they get anything, it's that you have so much. And it's not to say that I have so less, but your perspective and your mindset will take you further than maybe your two legs will, maybe your two wheels will. But it will put you in places and rooms that you could never dreamed of or imagined of. But it all starts by betting on yourself.
Yeah.
Even when it's hard too. And even when you don't want to, and even when you don't want to wake up. Because there've been so many times where like I've rolled into rooms before, and we talked about some of the political stuff earlier, but like there's been so many rooms that I rolled into, and talk about like having imposter syndrome for a second. I look around and I'm like texting Grady. I'm like, babe, like so-and-so's here. This is crazy. What am I doing here? And that lasts for a second, but then I'm like, I'm just going to go up to that person. Like, I've had some really fun moments where I've been at concerts or other things, and I'm again, like very extroverted, and I've walked up to people like Paris Hilton, and I've just been like, I'm just such a huge fan. So great to see you here. Let's take a picture. And it's so funny because like all the world around me, like you just miss like 100% of the shots you don't take. I'll just go do everything, say yes to everything, go up and do it.
Yeah.
But your life isn't going to change unless you do.
Do you think this has made you more outgoing in a way?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I've always been super extroverted, but I don't know if I've maybe more. Yeah.
I can see that. I imagine that might even be a way for you to kind of like, not like beat that stuff out of your head. You know, be like, you know what, you know, any like self-limiting beliefs or anything like, no, I'm going to be a little extra forward, a little.
Always.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's
An
fun.
attitude.
It's fun because like, again, there's been so many rooms that I've gone into that I'm like, I'm the only person in a chair in this room.
Yeah.
Red carpets, conferences, events, premieres, etc. And I'm like, I'm the only person on two wheels in this room. And maybe 10 years ago, I would have thought, oh, that's kind of overwhelming. Or I'm so different. I don't belong here. There's nobody like me here. And now I'm like, we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot to talk about. And I deserve to be here. Just like everybody listening to this podcast
Yeah.
that has intention in growing and optimizing their life. It's like, you deserve to be here. But nobody's going to bet on you unless you do.
What do you tell someone that doesn't think they do, you know, belong or they don't deserve to be somewhere? Like, you know, because we work with a lot of men and women, but, you know, we do a men's retreat and we asked a couple questions in the beginning. A lot of them, I think it was basically everyone in the room stepped into a circle saying they didn't feel worthy at some point.
Yep.
You know, so what do you tell them?
There's been nothing more powerful than surrendering to Jesus in my life. That has been the biggest and most greatest change that I've ever experienced in my life. Is that we feel like on this earth we need to have it all together and we have all the answers. And if we don't have all the answers, then we're not worthy and we're not enough. Well, it's already all laid out for you. But your control, tightness to keep it all in is holding you back big time. But the surrendering has changed my life in the biggest way.
It's a very good explanation because, you know, when someone hears it surrender, they're not really sure what that means. But yeah, surrendering to a higher power.
Yeah,
you know,
it doesn't have to be Jesus, whatever you believe in. But having something greater than you is extremely powerful in everyday life.
I totally agree. And I think that applies to, I know it applies to everything. I was just talking to a friend about that. He was asking me, how do I go to another level with leadership? And I said, well, for me, it's having a higher power that I'm striving for and being led by, you know, because if we just focus on what we have here with, you know, with whatever our bodies and our money and the things that we do day to day, our tasks and all that, and trying to get as dialed in as possible and efficient as possible, like that only goes so far.
Right.
You know, and you can't really, you get stuck, you hit a ceiling, especially when it comes to like, you know, your own beliefs of, you know, your self limitations. But when you realize, oh, there's a much higher thing above me, one that I was created by, and something I could strive for at a much higher level, you realize, oh, there's no ceiling.
No,
I can become so much more capable as a leader and as a whatever.
And also it takes a lot of pressure off of you
It
to
does.
think that you need to have it all together.
Right.
And you need to make all the calls and it's all up to you. And if it's not up to you, then it's going to, you know, and
Talk about overwhelming, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And also just talk about like emotionally paralyzing.
Yeah.
Because I meet a lot of people and I have a lot of people in my life too that that are like, I just don't, what if I'm not good at it? And I'm like, I'm not good at anything. You don't start good at something.
Right.
I'm like, you know, but if I struck myself out every single time because I wasn't good at something, I mean, you don't get good at things by not doing them or not trying them. But people are terrified to try, terrified not to be good at something because they don't want to not be cool or not fit in or whatever it may be. And I'm like, I'm bad at everything that I start.
Oh, for sure.
Literally everything.
But that's the only way to
Physically.
really learn. Like I tell people all the time, like if you want to get good at something, whether it's business or a sport or whatever, you have to be playing the game. You have to be in the arena. You have to make decisions and then live with the ramifications, good, bad, or otherwise, of those decisions.
Right.
Like you can't research your way into it. You can't think your way into success. You have to be playing the game to understand what it's even like to learn for real.
I love what you said about surrender. It's a paradox that human beings were gifted free thought and rational thinking, because the paradox is your free thought, if you don't surrender to the fact that the path is already laid out to you, that free thought becomes a prison. Mm-hmm. And it's the most interesting paradox, because as soon as you surrender to that higher power, everything just goes whoop. You're like, oh, I'm going to walk that way. And it's a very interesting paradox that I've been thinking about a lot lately. about surrender and, you know, kneeling and all the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the path's there for you. How difficult and shitty it is, or how great and wonderful it is, are based on you completely.
Big time.
And had that driven into me very, very deeply with the experience that I had, because right before the realization that, you know, my ancestors told me in the breath work, like you're already here, you know, you're already ready for this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I talked to God first, and he essentially said, this isn't a me thing. I already gave you all the tests and all the tribulations and all the stuff. He's like, this is a you thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting, because it was like, most people talk about surrendering to God in a way where it's like, I let him take over. And it's like, well, I already did that. It was the surrendering the me part.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very interesting to see that paradox kind of play out and just kind of get validated by everything that you're saying today.
Yeah.
So.
There's a really amazing quote that I love. It's like, God can do a lot more of my surrender than he can with my control.
Mm-hmm.
And from like a recovering, like I said, perfectionist, wanting to be the best, that has always held so heavy with me. And I think for a lot of people that are trying to optimize their life and grow and everything, there's just a level of reflection that we talked about a little bit earlier in this podcast. It's like, there has to be reflection and honesty in yourself, and like, hey, this is where I'm at, but this is where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And how am I going to get there? But nobody teaches you that. You know what I mean? The surrender and the reflection and all of that. And
telling yourself the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And telling yourself the truth. And or also listening to other people that you trust around you that have your best interests at heart, you know?
Yeah.
Because usually people that have no interest in growing, it becomes very defensive, or they cut you out of their life, or there's a large level of disassociation, which
Mm-hmm.
is the biggest thing we see with a lot of people that come into the clinic and stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what you do now. You've mentioned the clinic and podcast, and I imagine you have some ways, hopefully, to help other people.
Big time.
I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So I'm a producer and was a publicist for a long time, but I work for a pretty well-known doctor. His name's Dr. Daniel Amen. He's pretty well known for his innovative work with brain SPECT scans that look at blood flow and activity in the brain. We have 11 clinics in the United States. We see the majority of patients we see are patients with behavioral disorders. So that's like ADHD, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, cognitive issues, et cetera. And when I first started working with him, I remember thinking, I had read his book, Healing ADD, and I had a bunch of people in my life that had ADHD.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, I just don't understand it. I don't understand why you're late. I don't understand all of this. Like, and it was frustrating to me because I'm quite neurotypical and on the other side, like anxiously early.
Yeah,
And yeah, well, it's like the Marines. I mean, I imagine that is like instilled a lot of like, if you're going to be late and everyone in your platoon is going to be late, then they're going to do like push-ups and you're going to like sit and watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the work has been so integral to just my understanding of mental illness, and also just like a lot of things that we talked about earlier, and like holistic healing and things that you can have the best brain, and how it can implement your life. And he, in his podcast that I produce, it's called Change Your Brain Every Day. We have on a wide range of different people, from professional athletes to celebrities, health leaders, et cetera. And it's like free therapy.
Yeah, I bet.
It's like free therapy every week. And the goal is always trying to help people, and give them information and services and education behind ways that they could better their mental health. And we help so many different patients at the clinic that really come to us as like a last resort. Like, I've been failed by multiple medications, by multiple providers, and like, you're my last hope. And I think the unique factor, other than the scans that we do at our clinic, are also the ability to get to the root cause. So we have a lot of like naturopathic doctors, we have functional medicine doctors, we have traditional psychiatrists, we have nutritionists, but the success stories will just like break your heart, like in the best way. And these are people that have been suicidal. These are parents that have children that, have XYZ in their life and are on their last leg. And it's been really amazing work that I've been lucky to, be around for. But I remember with Dr. Amen, when I first started with him, we had no social media. So we had like maybe, maybe like 5,000 followers on Instagram, and I lead his media team. So I kind of oversee social and video and production and everything. And now he has like 3.8 million followers on Instagram.
Nice.
He's got over 3 million on TikTok. And like, these are people now where the message is not just, oh, if you could come into the clinic and be evaluated, we can help you. It's like, no, the goal is to help people on a global scale and changing the conversation from mental illness to brain health. And yeah, it's been really important work. And I'm excited because like I wanted to work in the nonprofit sector because I wanted to help people, because a lot of people have helped me along my road, but it's a little different, but it's really meaningful, and I'm grateful.
I think it's great. I mean, helping people is so important for so many reasons. Even if someone themselves is struggling with something mentally, if they go and spend time helping someone else, it helps them.
Right.
You know, so we're huge fans of that. And I love what you guys do. We're fans of Doctor. He's great.
You guys got to come and get a scan.
I would love to do that.
Yeah, we got to talk about it. Cool. We have a clinic in Phoenix.
Okay.
We have a clinic in Phoenix, but we're obviously in Orange County.
Yeah.
But it's, you know,
well, maybe we'll have to go to Orange County then.
Yeah, big time. But the goal is always like, you know, people always say like, oh, well, what if it's bad? Like on the scan, what if my scan's not healthy? What if I've done damage? This, that. And I'm like, well, no matter what you've done, it's all good news because you're getting an image.
Wouldn't it be better
and now
to know?
It's like,
yeah, I would rather know.
No. See, you guys are the anomaly though. There's a lot of people that don't want to know.
Sure, they're terrified.
Is that like the people who, like weird noise happens in the car and they turn the radio up?
That's
they don't
great.
want to hear it. Yeah.
My level of discipline.
Can't hear that.
Could never. Oh my gosh, I could never. No, I'm like pulling over and like hyperventilating. But
that sounds expensive.
But there's a lot of people though that are like, well, and the expression the Dr. Amen always gives is like, well, if you knew a train was going to hit you, like maybe genetically or something going on or whatever, like wouldn't you want to get out of the way?
Right.
So
do you do some charity work as well?
Yeah. So we have an amazing nonprofit called the Change Your Brain Foundation. And we're actually, probably by the time this episode comes out, I can share this, but we're going to help the firefighters and the LA fighters. And we're going to offer them evaluations at our clinic at no cost. And
awesome.
It's absolutely devastating. And firefighters, their brains are super, super, super damaged from what they experience and the inhalation and what they do and the stress and everything, the poor eating, the poor sleeping. I mean, it matters.
It really does. Yeah. And people don't realize how toxic fire is. It's extremely dangerous.
Yep.
You know, so when we were talking about this when, you know, Palisades, my aunt's house burned down in the Palisades.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, terrible.
It's the side-by-side comparison, they had a graphic on social media that the Palisades fire in terms of acreages has burnt more than the entire like aisle of Manhattan.
Oh my God.
Think of all of Manhattan burned down. That's I mean, it's unfathomable.
Insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what we were talking about was how dangerous that cleanup is because you're burning paint and asbestos and, you know, lead and like all the things that are in our houses and cars and all that. It's not, it's not just ash.
Beautiful oak.
It's toxic.
No, they really, I mean, everybody from the firefighters and people that are helping with cleanup and everything. I mean, it's devastating what's happening there. And not just only from firsthand experience for people that have lost their fires or even firefighters that are cleaning up everything, but also there's very secondhand level trauma to people that are witnessing it all in the news.
Oh gosh, for sure. You know, we had a Riley Murph on. Is he a captain? Yeah, Captain Riley Murph from a fire station out here. He's a good friend of ours. He runs a 9/11 charity event that we do every year with him.
Oh, wow.
But people don't realize that, like, just regular on the duty, jobs for a fireman, it's extremely hazardous.
Right.
Smoke and, you know, everything, even the things they have to put over their faces, like they're in such a dirty environment. But then also think about what first responders do. They see the worst in life every single day.
The
That's
amount
their
of
job.
Psychological trauma and stress, police off everything. I mean, it's devastating. And I think if it's kind of like, I like to give the Tom Brady example of like, football is a brain damaging sport. Like, let's just call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
But if you know that you're Tom Brady and you get paid what you get paid. You're going to play football. So if you're going to play football, then you need to do everything else right. You need to do hyperbaric oxygen. You need to prioritize sleep. You need to prioritize nutrition, like everything. And it's the same thing for firefighters. Like if you know that you're going to be in this battlefield just every day in your traditional 9 to 5, it's like you need to be sitting in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. You need to be taking supplements. You need to be minding your food. You need to be getting as much sleep as you possibly can when you can. Like, but drinking to disassociate after you get off your shift, because I mean, there's a lot of unhealthy, the donuts with the cops.
Totally.
You know, it's
sad.
Let's be real.
Yeah.
About it.
I'm glad you're doing that for them, because they're going to need a lot of help. And not just the firefighters, just people that are going to be cleaning up.
I know.
You know, there's going to be so much. So, you know, unfortunately, the clinic is going to be extremely busy for years. But fortunately it is, because that means you're helping people. So
I know that's the goal. Like I said, help as many people as we can have better brains and better lives. And even if they can't come to the clinic and they want to, you know, get more information, Dr. Amen's he's written so many different books. But we post every single day on our podcast. A podcast is once a week, and then every single day on his social tips that can help them have a better brain and better life. And I always like to leave people this statistic with our work. It's like, if 1 in 2 people will struggle with a mental health issue sometime in their life, so it's more common to struggle than it is to not. And if you don't personally struggle, you will love somebody that has or will. So
I'll make sure that Riley knows about what you guys do, especially with the clinic here.
Yeah.
You know, because we work at their charity, and you're right, that whole industry needs help. They really do.
Needs a revamp.
Same with
it needs a revamp.
Jamie
It does.
And the SWAT guys.
Yeah.
And wellness is sexy. Like wellness,
totally.
you know, wellness, biohacking, wellness, like it's sexy. Like it's a very, I hate to say that mental illness is sexy, but like mental health is sexy. Like it's being much more talked about now than it ever has. Same with biohacking. So there's a lot of sizable changes that they could make that would really help their staff.
Yeah. Well, it's great because, you know, one of the things we do at our retreat is we have men face their demons, like things they're not proud of, things that are holding them back, instead of, you know, running from it, because that's why it just stays there and it festers, it gets stronger and it turns into a bigger problem. But if you can face it, which is why, you know, doing the brain scan and do these things, so you can get the information and face a potential problem head on, then it could potentially go away.
Yeah, and your life could be so much happier,
so much better.
Yeah.
Well, what about you? Do you? I mean, I'm just going to assume here, but books, podcasts, coaching groups, like what do you do? Because whatever it is, I'm going to tell you right now, you need to do more of it.
I would love, I think in an ideal world, I would love to start a podcast. And I've been writing for years. Okay. So writing is my like deep passion. And I've just recently started sharing my life over the past couple of years on social media pretty openly. But I would love to put a book out on my experience. And it's not necessarily, and I don't want to put out a memoir. Like that's not my goal. My goal is to have it be something that is very tactical, self-help, optimization that anybody could benefit from, whether you have something horrific happen to you or you're just wanting to build mental fortitude and discipline and, you know, resilience and just and self-love no matter what you're going through. Yes. So that's like those are the 2 goals. So I don't know. I could talk for hours on a podcast. You guys already know that.
I was going to say, please do that, because you have so much to share with, like you said, like anybody, everybody. That's a book that I would read. That's a book that we would recommend to our people. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
Like absolutely. Man, please do it.
Thank you. I will. But
we'll get Andy White on it.
Yeah, exactly. Team Andy 100. But I think like moving forward, my goal has always been to be able to change people's perspectives no matter what they're going through. So like as of right now on my social media, that's kind of been my goal, and just sharing a little bit more openly about real things that I've gone through. In my most like viral-esque video though, which is so funny because we didn't talk about, but like I love Altoids so much. Like so much. It's like I don't like gum. I just love Altoids. But like you know what the problem is? I can't open them. So there's like this thick ring of plastic around it, and like with my hands they don't open and close like greatly. And I posted this video, and I wasn't going to post it because I kind of thought it was embarrassing. And I was like, you know, I think people should hear this, because when I was scrolling, so many people were complaining about their days and like whatever. And I was like, oh, you guys want to complain? Let's go. I'm gonna one up you. And so anyways, I posted this video and I was like, hey, so I just want to let everybody know that it took me 17 minutes to open an Altoids can. 17 minutes. And I clocked it because I like put my timer on. I'm like, well, let's go. Let's eat whatever. And my point in sharing that wasn't to get people to feel sorry for me, was to get people to see that like you have so much, even if it's just your dexterity.
Yeah.
Even if it's just even if you stood up today, somebody right now is praying for what you have. And in that moment, it was me, for people that's hands open and close easily. But the response that I got from that video, it was so funny because I was like, I wasn't even going to share it. And that's my goal, though, is to change people's perceptions and hopefully help them go inward.
Yeah.
In all that they have. And so.
Well, you're doing it, just so you know, you're doing it because I'm being affected by this conversation. I know Adam is. I already have some ideas on some things I want to ask you after this to help kind of get you out there.
Yeah.
But man, my hat is on, but it's off to you for what you have been through and what you continue to do. And you have such a remarkable story and a remarkable everything, remarkable mind. I wish you the absolute best. And I want you to get out there and become magnitudes more famous than Dr. Amen. Because I mean, for real, like the world is really struggling, physically and mentally.
Yeah,
it really is. And I'm excited to have a lot more awakeness and awareness of like the mental or physical health that's coming out with food quality and water and everything that RFK is hopefully going to be able to do.
Yeah,
I think that's ultra important because that's also going to help people's minds.
Yeah, and for generations to come too.
For generations to come, for sure. But I mean, just one conversation with you, I'm like, man, we got to be way harder on our people because come on. Like this is unbelievable. You know what I mean?
I'm going to send that video to a couple people after this.
Oh my gosh, please. I would love it. Please. I hope I get an invite to a retreat sometime.
Yes.
I would love to come and just like facilitate a conversation between some of these men and hear them. And I just I would find so much value in that. But the last thing I'll leave people with is in February, which feels very full circle to me because I kind of strayed away from it when I didn't really want to talk about my story. And I kind of was like, if I don't talk about it, then it's not that big of a deal or whatever. But you just like can't hide from who you are. And I got invited to speak to a bunch of young high school students, girls that are athletes at this big conference. It's like 2,000 people. It's in February. And I was kind of noodling on, I'm like, okay, well, what point do I want to bring across? Like, what do I want them to learn, et cetera? And my biggest takeaway was that, you know, we are only here for so long. And we go so far into the future of this is what I want. And I did that growing up, but I would love to be able to share with them that like, there is so much value in all that you have right now. And you have so much. And if you're able to build on that with how great you already are and learn more confidence and fortitude through going through hard things, and a little bit of an attitude in the mix of that, I feel like I could really kill that. So I'm really excited to think about how I can get that to them and hopefully stick that with them so that when they step in the batter's box or they kick a soccer ball or they go to the free throw and it's, you know, even just like with softball, it's like, you know, it's like the bottom of the ninth and the bases are loaded and there's 2 outs and like, you don't jump into the batter's box and be like, I hope I don't strike out. It's like, no, I'm going to kill this. I'm going to kill this pitch. I'm going to smack it out of the park. I'm going to win the game. And it's like, that's always revving, but you don't rev like that until you get honest with yourself and you talk about the things that are holding you back and then you work every day at that. So I'll get some fun. We'll get some fun videos from that and share with you guys.
Let's end it with that fire because that was phenomenal. Natalie, thank you so much for being here. No matter where people are listening, they're going to get links to you and whatever you want below. People need to learn more from you. So I wish you the absolute best.
Thank you for having me. This was an amazing conversation. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate it. If there's anything else you'd like to share, I think we shared an incredible amount. This is something I think people are going to have to listen to a couple times, especially understanding where it all comes from. So thank you very much for your time today. Wish you the best in the future. Have a great wedding when that comes up.
Oh, thank you so much. Absolutely. Thank you for having me again. I appreciate the conversation. And I hope everybody that's listening remembers that you're not stuck where you are. And that, you know, I know that I definitely felt like I was at one point and not anymore.
Awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. You bet. Anytime.